Hello there. In this video, I'm looking at the Shatterpoint missions transmission. Hello AOS fans, Robin here, and I'm back with another video about one of the Shatterpoint transmissions, a transmission about the missions. So there you go. So yes, this week, Monday, I think they released, AMG released another transmission on their blog about how the Star Wars Shatterpoint might work. They drip, feeding us that information, and of course that has totally offended some people, obviously, because, you know, why would they use marketing techniques to try and keep us interested in the game? Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they just give everything that this person or those people wanted? Who knows? Anyway, that's not what this video is about. There's always going to be people moaning. I heard today there's people moaning that Gloomhaven has been knocked off the #1 spot on Wargame Geek by Brass Birmingham, and they're going to try and take Brass Birmingham off the top. Game as what can you do? Luckily, most of you are all lovely, and particularly if you're watching this end of the internet, because, you know, I'm lovely, you're lovely, and we can all give ourselves a self-congratulatory pat on the back. Anyway, enough of that. Let's go look at the missions. So they announced there were going to be missions, and you know, it was really interesting how when I first read the review, I thought, oh, well, you know, I would never have thought of doing it that way. And it struck me how interesting that is about games that, you know, I mean, like, don't say, just I was talking about Brass Birmingham and Gloomhaven, they're completely different things, and yet they're still both games that are on Board Game Geek. And you know, obviously tabletop games, basically there's three functions of a tabletop game. Well, not functions, but there's three core components of a miniatures game. You've got your miniatures, you've got your dice, and a ruler. You know, and yet there's a whole plethora, amazing gamut of games, and now Shatterpoint is going to be added to that. So I think that's really great, and I really like that. It struck me about reading this post about some of the interesting and innovative things that they're going to be doing with the game. On my last video, a few people commented on the fact that I mentioned that I didn't know whether strike teams made up of 2 squads, and I didn't know whether both squads would be fielded on the board twice. Several people said, oh yes, they've said that they are. I still haven't found where it says that. So if you have seen it, then please do comment below where you've seen it, or put a link where you've seen it. But I'm moving towards that thought. There's a bit of me that doesn't really like that. Just don't like the idea that you can have non-thematic sets on the board simultaneously. So you can have, you know, clones and stormtroopers on the board simultaneously, or clones and, I don't know, I'm not sure what, but different eras or whatever. I'm not overly keen on that. But reading a little bit closer, I kind of feel like that's probably the way it's going to be, and I guess it's going to be down to the individual how thematic or otherwise they go. And the reason I say that is because when I was looking quite closely on one of the things, I couldn't find it explicitly stated. I did find where they were talking about synergies. It says that your synergies, like your keywords and things, will work across squads and strike teams, kind of implying that they are going to be on the table all at once. So I suppose that's good in some ways, and I suppose it's also bad in others. It opens up more list building opportunities, but it also is a bit of a thematic break for those who don't like that. But as somebody else commented on the video, you know, if you play casually, not going to be a problem. You can be as thematic or unthematic as you like. So the first new reveal of this transmission, I suppose, was this new concept of struggle. There's going to be 3 phases in the game, and each phase is going to be a struggle, and if you win 2 of the 3 phases, then you win. So it's kind of best of 3. And the way the struggle works, for those of you who have ever played God Tier, it's quite similar to that. You've basically got a sliding scale. I'll flash a picture up. But you've got a sliding scale of 0 in the middle, and then 7 either end, and or 8 either end, in fact. And each time you get a point of struggle, you move the block towards your end. If it gets to your end, then you've won. And obviously, if your opponent fights right back, then it goes that way. It goes back and forth until somebody gets to 7, and that is at the end of a struggle, and you're winning 1-0, and then you reset, and you go do the next one, and then it's, like I say, it's a best of 3. So that's quite interesting. I like that God Tier mechanic. In God Tier, there are different weightings to which round you're playing, so it's not quite the same, but the general concept of a sliding scale in the centre is the same, which I kind of like. In God Tier, I think there was a time limit as well, so you had a certain number of rounds, and then if nobody won after that time, then whoever was winning took the round. They haven't said that here, whether this just keeps going until one of you gets to 7. You can influence it. They've added this. They've got this concept called momentum, which means you can start adding blocks to the end of the track. So you can add blocks from. So if it starts at 0, you can add blocks from the 8 end inwards to make it quicker for you. You've got less far to travel in order to actually win the game. They've said that your character actions will help you gain momentum blocks. So if you wound an enemy fighter, you can have momentum cubes to the track. So that there's going to be ways to influence the game, I guess, to gain momentum and get closer to winning. As I kind of expected, this game is going to be based on missions, particularly as we knew from the transmission title. It was going to be called missions, and they are kind of key to how the game plays. Each game there is a mission. So they showed up 2 cards. I'm not quite sure. I think these are separate. I think one's the mission card. I think Shifting Priorities is the mission card, and then Steal the Secret Plans is what they called a Phase 1 card. So the Shifting Priorities card, it's got a little map which kind of lays out the objectives. So the objectives need to be you place. They're unidentified objectives, I think they called them, and you place them. I think the little numbers there are they're the measuring devices. Because I've seen in the in the release, you're going to get like MCP and Legion, you're going to have bespoke measuring tools. And so basically the objectives, there's 9 objectives or potential places for objectives to go, and they start from 4 away from the edges and 5 away from each other. We don't know how far that is, but I assume there won't be that much disparity. So you get this nice grid of potential objective places. There's a little bit of text on the left-hand side. That's to do with the second and third struggle, so we'll come on to that in a minute. And then on the Phase 1 card, which I think is the Steal the Secret Plans card, you've got a little map which corresponds, as you see, with those 9 spots. And that tells you where the active objectives are in this first phase, first struggle. And you'll be fighting to control the first to control these objectives in the first phase. And if you have control of an objective at the end of your turn, then you gain a you move the struggle counter 1 in your direction. So so that little map there, that shows you the active objectives for the current struggle. One curious thing, and it's not made explicitly clear again, is this concept of a turn. What will a turn be in this game? I don't think I'm going to move all my models and then you're going to move all your models. I don't think it'll be like that. It's probably going to be like I move 1, you move 1. I move 1, you move 1. And does that mean if that's a turn, if a single moving of a model is a turn, and of course I don't know whether a turn is moving a single model or some units are made up of multiple models. I don't know whether a turn will be moving all of the models in a unit. That hasn't been explained. But let's assume you're going to be moving models, and I would assume that one movement is a turn, or possibly one movement of 2 models is a turn. And that means that you're going to be scoring these quite a lot. Move a model, potentially score an objective. Your opponent moves something, then you maybe move a different model. This one's still holding that objective. Do you score that again? It's not quite clear. I think probably you will. I think it's going to be quite a quick game. So I think they're going to try and keep you scoring. So if you can get somebody on an objective early, and then every time we're doing other things with other fighters, that he's racking up the points, that's really good. That invites your opponent to come and try and take that character, that fighter out. So that involves, that gets you down to fighting on the tabletop nice and quickly. If you're not going to be able to sit back and just watch what happens, because your opponent will swarm the objectives and they will completely take over the board and win the struggle. So once one of you has got the struggle token, once one of you's got the struggle token always to the end, that's the end of that phase. You're 1-0 up. That person is 1-0 up, and then you go on to the second phase. Now they've talked about you flipping over a second phase card at this point. And it's worth noting that now go back to the Shifting Priorities card, it does say during the second and third struggles, at the start of each of their turns, players roll 1 defense dice and consult the mission map to mark the corresponding active objective token with a priority objective token. A player that controls 1 or more active objectives marked with a priority objective token moves the struggle token 1 additional space towards the momentum tokens at the end. So they're kind of like super objectives that are even better. Now I have noticed, interesting, just as I was reading that out, literally live on air, my brain is thinking, at the start of each of their turns, players roll 1 defense dice. I'm now wondering whether that isn't going to be all alternate activation, because that's a lot of rolling and a lot of changing over of objectives, which is a bit daft, really. So I'm now wondering whether perhaps it is just going to be, I'm going to roll, it's my turn, I move my fighters to the objectives that I've just set, and then and then you score, and then your opponent does things. The objectives change a little bit, and then they do theirs, and that it actually feels better than, oh, I'm rolling on now. My objective I wanted now over there. That doesn't feel so good. So that was literally straight off the top of my head. So do agree, disagree, whatever, chime in, let me know. And I do occasionally think on the fly. Anyway, enough of that thinking. In the second phase, so you've got to turn over a second phase card, they show something called We Are Going to Need a New Exit. Now the interesting thing about the second phase cards, it is the person who lost who gets to choose what happens. And in this card, the active objectives become those ones that are lit up there. And as you can see, there's 2 at one end and 1 at the other. So if you're losing, you can pick the end. I would assume you pick the end with 2 that's closest to your board edge. You've probably got more fighters there. And they've also got little symbols, and those little symbols correspond to the dice that we've seen in the pre-order photos. So again, you might have a way of that's going to set that priority objective in the shifting priorities blurb text. And again, you can put 2 at your end, assuming the dice have got equal numbers of symbols on them. Then you obviously got more chance of getting a priority objective at your end for phase 2. So that's kind of interesting. And if you go on to win that, then your opponent presumably in the third phase would then have a similar advantage. And that assumes there are phase 3 cards. They haven't said whether there are phase 3 cards, but I assume each phase is going to turn over a new card. Potentially, maybe not. So if the same player has won both of the previous struggles, then that's it, that's game over. One interesting thing they did say, between struggles, the board state doesn't change. So any conditions you've got, any injuries, any damage, they all remain on the fighters. So you might have, you might be nearly dead and got an objective, which means next phase you're going to be in trouble, whoever's nearly dead. It's kind of interesting. They actually use the phrases damage, injuries and wounds remains on fighters. I'm fascinated to know whether that's kind of like just copywriters speak, or whether they are actually defined terms in the game, because damage, wounds and injuries all seem like quite similar concepts to me. Be interesting to see if they're differentiating the game, or whether that's just a slight descriptive veneer for the post. So yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's not that uncommon. Most games have objectives in them, and between turns you kind of carry things through, but it's interesting because you are actually getting closer to winning. It's almost like your overall objective, because you've won a struggle, is you're one step closer, and you have to carry on with however you've got. Kind of like that, kind of feels like, if you go all out at the beginning and maybe take lots of casualties, then actually you can be ground down by your opponent. Similarly, maybe you've got the opposite of that. You're quite slow out of the blocks, but actually then you bring your power to bear later in the game, so you lose the first one, but then you win the other 2. I think that's quite good. I think intriguing. I say it's not completely earth-shattering. Most games have objectives that shift over the course of the game, or the whole game goes on for whatever number of turns it is, but you haven't really got a defined ending either. It's not like Warhammer, where I think you play for 4 turns each and then you stop. You actually literally have, it could be over if you don't fight back after losing the first one. That's it, it's game over. There's no way back in if you lose game 2 as well. So that is the missions transmission. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you completely disagree. I think most people generally have enjoyed this content. I hope you have. If you have, then please like and subscribe and all that jazz. Please throw down any comments if you've seen any extra things. Try to be as careful as possible. I'm not always the best picking out information from things. Probably makes me not the ideal person to make these videos, but hopefully you've enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll see you soon on the Agents of Sigmar. Bye for now.